Hello everyone, I'm Fabrice Debarge, Project Manager at Praxinos. Today I'm going to present my work for the summer of Unreal and share my discoveries, my workflow and my tips. As a reminder, the summer of Unreal was organized by InCast Training in Germany. It was aimed at European professionals interested in learning Unreal Engine and real-time technologies. The final task was to make a 15-second project with a simple camera movement from left to right. Here is what I made at the end of the course. My basic idea was to make a coherent stylized scene. I didn't have a precise objective in my mind when I started. It came to me as the 4 weeks went by. There was a lot of feedback on social networks and a lot of people asked questions about the process. We will now cover this in more details. So, the plugins. I used some basic plugins that come with Unreal Engine, but not necessarily the one installed by default. The modeling tools which allowed me to redo the UV map of the boat, for example. This plugin has been improved with the arrival of Unreal Engine 5 and it has become very practical. Here on the boat, you can see in real time how the mesh is unfolded to the form of a UV map. You can choose a number of facets or apply a checkboard to see how things look. I of course used our Iliad drawing plugin, which is free in the permanent collection of the Unreal Engine marketplace. It's a version that is under development, because for the moment Iliad doesn't allow you to draw correctly in the viewport on object with UV map having seams. But as this part of the software is currently being reworked, I wanted to test the improvement. It was also an opportunity to track down some potential bugs here and there, and we fixed a few. So yes, we are the kind of developers who used our one tools in real life to test them. In terms of assets, well, I didn't create everything myself. The interest of Unreal Engine being its ecosystem, the megascans, the metahumans, the marketplace, and many others. Also, in August 2022, there was this cartoon water shader assets that was made available for free, which saved me a lot of time in making the water. I adjusted some settings in the blueprint, but nothing more. Then, not being a 3D animator by profession, I took this boat and the animations that came with it. Finally, I found this character that I had already bought and used some time before. The idea was to try the new retargeting options of Unreal Engine 5 to pass an animation from the basic mannequin to an already rigged character. For the scenery, such as rocks and trees, most of the elements came from the free Quixel megascans, especially in the collection Environment, Natural, Nordic Forest. For the different foliage, I used this paid brush pack for Iliad, which contains natural elements like leaves. I'm not a 3D animator, so I reused elements captured in mocap directly in the sequencer. To avoid bugs with objects attached to each other, I placed my objects in processable mode because I couldn't do it well in spawnable mode. I merged several sections together to try and get smooth movement. The following shortcut, Ctrl plus left click, is very useful to do so. And since the character is a human, not all the paddle strokes have exactly the same duration. I was asked about the movement of the boat. It's quite simple. I made it move using the sequencer curve system, especially for everything related to pitch and roll. Here again, it's important to avoid perfect sinusoids because nothing is ever perfect in the nature. With Insight, I think that the inertia following the paddle stroke could be improved. Maybe I will make it better in the future. The day before finishing the project, I wanted to test the new retargeting options of Unreal Engine 5. That is why the dummy became the little guy you see. It was much easier to set up than I thought. Basically, you have to match the skeletal mesh of the dummy to the character's skeletal mesh. And you need to specify what is an arm, a leg, a finger, etc. It's quite quick to set up. You can see the result here in some animations. However, this has some limitations. For example, the size of the boat and the oars is not really adapted to the morphology of the little boy. And I had to adapt. For example, by adding a board in the boat, without which the character would float in the air. I had to remove the wings too. Also, the little boy's head is very large and any small movement inherited from the dummy had to be attenuated or the movement would look a bit strange. In hindsight, the retargeting step seems to me to be something that should be done from the beginning to avoid these last-minute fixes. In any case, it was very interesting to study this part of Unreal Engine 5. I discovered the post-processing materials during the Incast training. I hadn't explored this field much before and I knew you could make simple filters to adjust colors, but with a little more work on the materials, I realized that you could modify shadows, cast shadows, create outlines, adjust effects, depending on the distance of the object from the camera. It was exciting and I studied many tutorials on the web for about 3 days. I have redone some, combined some, etc. I still have a lot to learn and fix in my post-process material. It sometimes made the colors too bright, which was a problem, so I won't publish it as it is. But there is an idea of how it works. It applies on several levels. I wanted to be able to apply a sheet of paper on the surface of the assets, especially because I wanted to paint them. Then I wanted to generate shadows, but ones that are not super realistic in terms of shape and opacity. Also, I succeeded to make an adjustable toon shading on the objects. Here again, I had to experiment to avoid too much realism. Finally, I tried to generate outlines. This was not absolutely necessary in my project, but I wanted to build and test this option. Now we come to the most interesting part, drawing on the megascans. I made many attempts and here is my workflow. First, getting the asset not as a virtual texture but as a classic texture. Iliad currently only handles classic textures. Second, attenuating the normal map, otherwise the shape of the assets will be too precise for a stylized render. Third, replacing the texture albedo with an empty texture that has a colored background, for example, gray for a rock. Then, adding a layer in multiply mode to add the shadows. In my opinion, I didn't manage to make convincing shadows with the post-process material, so I drew them by hand. Maybe this will be improved in the future. As a result, you should not change the direction of the light once it has been chosen. Also, you can possibly add another layer for the midtones, and finally, if there is moss on the object to be painted, this can be the subject of a last layer with some other brushes. Painting is quite fast if you use the right drawing brushes with the right transparency values. For my part, I used and modified the watercolor and the rust brushes supplied by default with Iliad. This was very helpful when painting the trees. For the rust brush, I sometimes use it in eraser mode with some change in the stamp ratio. This gives a bark effect on the tree and that's really interesting. For the watercolor brush, if you want watercolor scenery, there is no need to go looking for super complex algorithm to manage fluids and flows. It will certainly be beautiful, but most of the time very difficult to control with the stylus, and even more on a 3D environment. Better to use wheel-scanned watercolor. Some simple spots will make a very good stamp for your blueprint brush. But you have to be careful. If you go over the same spot several times while drawing, the transparency adds up. This can be managed with the Alpha Mode Max option. Each new line is not added to the previous one. There is a question that often comes back to me. Why did you use Iliad rather than Quixel Mixer or Substance Painter, which are more advanced in terms of options, PBR, etc.? My answer is simple. With Iliad, I can draw anywhere in the map of my choice, not just on a given asset that I will then export to Unreal Engine and place in the map. This is quite important because from my point of view, each map is almost a composition on its own. You first place the objects and then you paint them. This makes all the difference to me. You work on the scene as a whole and you can think of it step by step, as you would do with a real painting. You go quickly from one object to another while keeping in mind the rendering of the wall. This is quite crucial for the choice of the colors and for the drawing of the shadows. This gives the following steps. The megascans to import and place in the level, megascans without albedo, with less marked normal map, and with post-processing. And then the same elements with different colors and brush strokes. There are many ways in Unreal Engine to create vegetation elements like leaves. I did not use them because I wanted to see if we could get closer to a real drawing process. I used the leaf number 1 brush from the Nature brush pack in the marketplace, changing the original color gradient and checking the flat option. Depending on the pressure of the stylus, the leaves were darker or lighter. Tree foliage is either created on spheres or cylinders. This gives a less flat rendering when the camera moves. There is a more satisfying feeling of volume. I finally made a layer in hue blending mode on the top of the others to adjust the hue of the green, which can tend toward red or blues. It took me a while to understand that the exponential 8 fog changed the colors of the planes in the background of the map, so be careful with this option. The pop-field effects are also to be avoided because in our case each plane near or far must avoid blur. You can save time by using the same plane, the same 3D object, or the same texture several times. Just make sure you don't use them in the same proportions or orientation. You can use decals here and there for the water restrictions on the rocks or on the trees. I didn't work on the collision box, so the boat sinks a little, but fortunately, due to the camera position, it's not visible. No need to draw on the wall map, only the camera angles used in the sequencer are important. To help you know where to draw, opening a second viewport with only the camera view can save you a lot of time. It's quite possible to combine several megascans to make a larger or more detailed object. That's the end of this tutorial. Of course, I already knew some parts of Unreal Engine before starting this project. However, the software is so vast, it was an opportunity to learn some modules I didn't know or that had changed with the release of the version 5. By the way, I would like to thank our teachers and mentors who helped us during the summer of Unreal: Stefan Rubb, Daniel Roas, Robin Hasenbach. And remember that there is no need to make explosions, monsters, robots, complex effects to create a nice sequence. Sometimes just a beautiful background can replace them all.